Welcome to the AI-powered reader, your shortcut to unlocking the world's best books. Get ready to absorb key insights, understand core concepts, and expand your knowledge all in a fraction of the time. Let's dive in.
Today, we're diving into Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Dr. Peter Attia. The book's central argument is that modern medicine, Medicine 2.0, excels at fighting fast death, but fails against the slow death of chronic disease. Attia proposes Medicine 3.0, a proactive strategy focused on extending health span, the quality of our years, not just our lifespan. His audience is the lay reader in their 30s to 50s who has watched elders suffer and has no desire to reenact that fate. The book asks, what is the plan to prevent the four horsemen, heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, or type 2 diabetes and related metabolic dysfunction before they take root? Dr. Attia's authority was forged in the trenches, first as a surgical resident at Johns Hopkins, frustrated by treating diseases too late, then as a McKinsey risk analyst, mastering quantitative systems, and finally as his own patient when a health crisis at 36 forced him to apply that rigor to his own biology.
Today, we are diving deep into Dr. Peter Attia's game-changing book, Outlive. This isn't just another health book. It's a challenging and honestly, a deeply hopeful blueprint for not just living longer, but living so much better. It's a book that really tries to re-engineer our entire approach to health and aging from the ground up.
So here's our game plan. We're going to cover 4 key areas. First up, we'll look at Attia's personal rebellion against the medical establishment. Then, we'll get into his core philosophy, this idea of strategy before tactics. After that, we'll spend the bulk of our time on the really actionable stuff, the 3 pillars of health span. And finally, we'll wrap up with a balanced look at the book's powerful but maybe imperfect vision for the future.
You know, to really get what Outlive is all about, you have to start with the deep, deep sense of frustration that created it. This is not some dry academic text. It's what happens when a top-tier surgeon, someone at the peak of his field, realizes the entire system he's mastered is, well, it's fighting the wrong war.
As a young surgical resident at Johns Hopkins, one of the best hospitals in the world, Attia was just haunted by this recurring nightmare. He'd dream he was desperately trying to catch eggs that were falling from the sky, but no matter what he did, he could only watch them smash on the ground. It's a powerful metaphor, right? That's what his job felt like, always reacting to disasters at the very last second, but completely powerless to stop them from happening in the first place.
So Attia gives this system we're all in a name, Medicine 2.0. And look, it's brilliant at what he calls fast death, things like a car crash, a nasty infection, or a heart attack that's happening right now. The problem is, it is tragically bad at handling the slow death of chronic diseases that will affect most of us. It's a system that just waits for the eggs to fall before it even flinches.
He frames medical history in these 3 stages. You had Medicine 1.0, which was basically ancient guesswork. Then came Medicine 2.0, the scientific revolution that gave us antibiotics and vaccines and doubled our lifespan. But Attia argues its success is now the problem. He says we have to build Medicine 3.0, a whole new framework that is proactive, deeply personalized, and focused not just on lifespan, but on health span. That's the quality and capability of our years.
And then, this whole mission got intensely personal. In his mid-30s, Attia, who, by the way, was a dedicated endurance athlete, looked like the picture of health, gets some routine blood work back. The results were a total shock. He was highly insulin resistant, a clear sign he was heading straight for type 2 diabetes and all the other chronic diseases that drove him crazy. The doctor fighting the system suddenly realized he was about to become its next patient. The eggs he was trying to catch, they were his own.
That personal wake-up call is the perfect bridge into the book's absolute core philosophy. Before you even think about tactics, the right diet, the best workout, you have to have a strategy. You have to know what you're fighting for.
Attia comes back to this quote from Sun Tzu again and again. For him, the tactics are all the things we get obsessed with: intermittent fasting, going keto, HIIT workouts, the latest supplements. But chasing these things without a clear, big-picture strategy, that's just the noise before defeat. You're just jumping on trends, you're not actually executing a long-term plan to win.
He uses the Titanic as the perfect analogy.
Medicine 2.0 is the lookout in the crow's nest, screaming about an iceberg when it's just moments away from impact. It's a heroic, frantic, last-ditch effort that is pretty much doomed to fail. Medicine 3.0, his goal, is like having satellite imaging and radar. You see the whole ice field from hundreds of miles away and make a tiny, almost effortless course correction right now to avoid danger completely. So the question becomes, what is our ice field?
For Attia, the strategy is razor sharp. We have to focus all our preventive efforts on the 4 big groups of chronic diseases that are, statistically speaking, the most likely to cause our decline and eventual death. He gives them a memorable name, the 4 Horsemen.
So who are they? Heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, and metabolic dysfunction, which covers things like type 2 diabetes. Now, they all look like separate problems, right? But here's Attia's key insight. They are deeply interconnected. They often share the same roots, things like insulin resistance and inflammation. So the strategy is to attack those roots, decades before a doctor could ever give you a diagnosis.
Okay, so with that strategy locked in, prevent the 4 Horsemen by targeting their root causes way early, we can finally talk tactics. The book organizes all the actionable advice into 3 foundational pillars.
And he starts with a question that's really designed to cut through all the noise. I mean, in a world of endless supplements, superfoods, and biohacking gadgets, what is the single most powerful thing we can do?
The answer is just so clear, and it's the first and most important pillar: exercise. Not a pill, not a fancy diet, but just purposeful movement. According to Attia, the data on this is it's overwhelming. Nothing else even comes close to its power to extend both our lifespan and our health span.
The data here is seriously stunning. This chart basically shows the link between your cardiorespiratory fitness, your VO2 max, and your risk of dying from anything. It is one of the strongest predictors of how long you'll live that we have. People with elite fitness for their age have a dramatically lower risk of dying than even people with average fitness. And get this, being in the bottom quarter for fitness is a greater risk factor for death than smoking. Let that sink in for a second.
So how should we train? Attia proposes this brilliant mental model he calls the centenarian decathlon. The goal isn't to be an elite athlete when you're 40. The goal is to be a fully capable, totally kick-ass 100-year-old. He asks you to actually write down the 10 physical events you want to be able to nail in your last decade. Can you pick up a grandchild from the floor? Can you lift your own suitcase into an overhead bin? Can you get up off the floor using only one hand? And then you reverse engineer your training today to make damn sure you can do those things then. It completely changes why you go to the gym.
All right, the second pillar is nutrition. And here, Attia calls for a ceasefire in the diet wars with his Nutrition 3.0 approach. It's not about dogma, it's about personal data. Instead of asking if a diet is good, he says to ask 3 questions about yourself. Am I getting the right amount of fuel? Am I getting enough protein to support my muscle? And am I metabolically healthy? The goal is to use real, objective data to find what actually works for your body.
The final pillar is the most profound: emotional health. In a really raw and personal part of the book, Attia shares his own intense struggles with anger and perfectionism. He talks about how his therapist completely floored him with this devastatingly simple question. It forced him to face the fact that emotional well-being isn't just a nice-to-have. It's the absolute foundation of a life that's worth living longer in the first place. True health span has to include emotional health, period. So the book lays out this revolutionary, honestly inspiring vision for health, but it's not without its challenges. So in this last section, we want to give you a balanced look at what makes Outlive so compelling and also where its blueprint might have some limitations.
So let's break it all down, and we'll start with 3 things this book just does brilliantly.
First, it masterfully shifts the entire paradigm of medicine from reactive to proactive. That Medicine 3.0 concept completely changes the goalposts of what we should be aiming for. Second, it makes the most powerful case I've ever read for exercise as our #1 longevity tool. And that centenarian decathlon idea, it makes the goal so inspiring and deeply practical. And finally, its holistic view is just crucial. By putting emotional health front and center, it makes sure the whole quest for a longer life actually has a purpose, a real why.
But the blueprint does have its limitations. First up, accessibility. The amount of testing and tracking he advocates for, from constant glucose monitors to advanced scans, can be really expensive and honestly just out of reach for a lot of people. Second, Attia is very clear that he operates on evidence-informed principles, not always evidence-based.
We can't run a 50-year clinical trial on longevity, so it requires you to take some leaps of faith based on the best but sometimes incomplete data we have. And finally, for some people, this intense focus on optimization could create some serious health anxiety, turning wellness into a stressful, all-consuming job.
Ultimately, what Outlive is really arguing is that longevity without purpose is an empty victory. The true challenge isn't just to add more years to your life, but to add more life to your years. And that forces all of us to ask that most fundamental question: for what and for whom are we doing all this work? What's your why?
That's all for this episode of the AI-powered Reader. We hope today's summaries sparked new ideas and brought you valuable insights. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and consider leaving a review. It really helps others discover the show. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reading, or rather listening.